Welcome to the Grad School Femtoring Podcast. This is Doctora Eva Martinez-Vu, and I will be serving as your femtor, providing you with tips and tricks and everything else you need to know to get into graduate school. For the past 10 years, I've been helping undergraduate students get into top graduate programs in their field, and I'm really excited to share this information with you too. Okay, we are live. I am really excited. Today we have another really great guest speaker. Her name is Eva Meza, and she is going to be talking to us today about getting into grad school in psychology. And I'm going to go ahead and get started with her bio. So Eva Meza is an incoming first-year psychology PhD student at UC Davis. She has been awarded the Distinguished Scholar Fellowship. Eva is from San Jose, California. I've actually got a good girlfriend who just moved there. She is a first generation born low-income student, and she's very passionate about increasing Latinx enrollment into graduate school. So welcome so much, Eva.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here, and I love listening to your podcast.
Oh, that means a lot. So, just to get us started, I would love, for me to get to know you a little bit more, for the listeners to get to know you a little bit more. So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, your backstory, and also everything that led you to pursuing, the graduate program you're about to start now?
Yes. So my parents are both born in Mexico. My mom is from Mexico City. My dad is from Nayarit. And I was born here in San Jose, California. I attended school here. My mom was very adamant about me attending Catholic school, and we were very low income, but I got by on scholarships and things like that. And I really enjoyed my education. I feel like it was a very good foundation. And my mom, although she had an education here, she grew up like a Chicana, and she's fluent in Spanish and English. She actually did go to college. When I started school, she also started school. And she did her bachelor's in psychology, and she became a teacher. And I saw her go through her educational journey, and that really normalized college for me. And I remember going to her classes and sitting in her classes, and her professors would give me toys and things to play with to keep me entertained while she did her schooling, and she got her credential, became a teacher. And I remember going to her classes as a fourth grader. She was teaching fourth grade. And it would be so much fun just interacting with other kids, and I would try to teach them. And it was a very good childhood. I got to interact with a lot of kids, and I got to see my mom go through her educational journey. My dad was also very, he was very encouraging and motivating when it came to education. I'm an only child, so all their resources and all their love and attention was funneled through me, and I had a very good, a good educational foundation, as well as a very good family, very good support system. And I never didn't think about going to college. I always thought I was going to college. It was just something so normal for me. And so I was at Notre Dame High School here in San Jose, and it was an all-girls Catholic school. So I was very excited to go to a co-ed undergraduate, and I chose UC Riverside. And it was just an amazing school. It was exactly what I needed. And my first choice was actually UC Davis, and I didn't get in. And I thought, I was a bit disappointed, but I feel like life gives you what you need, not what you want. And so UC Riverside was exactly what I needed. And I just had an amazing time. I really got to grow as a person. I really made a great support system. I met a lot of friends, a lot of like Latinos that looked like me, and it also normalized the whole graduate school thing for me as well. I came in as a chemistry major, so a lot of the friends that I made were pre-med, and they were all, translators at clinics and scribes, and really into the medical field. And I thought, like, all these people around me are going to be doctors, and they're all applying to grad school, and it just really continued to normalize the continuance of school for me. Yeah.
So, wow, there's so much there, so much from hearing your backstory about your mom and dad being so kind of critical to shaping your interests. That's so amazing that you got to witness your mom go through her own educational process and to have a very encouraging dad. And like you said, that was education, was normalized for you. And then you said something that like stuck with me. You said, life gives you what you need, not what you want. I love that. That's such a great quote in terms of how you ended up going to UCR instead of UC Davis. And now kind of, I feel like everything comes full circle because you're going to start at UC Davis, right? And so can you tell us, before you talk about like applying to grad school and, what it's like now about to go to UC Davis, can you tell us a little bit more about how you even got to psychology aside from your mom? I know you said you were around a lot of peers that were interested in med school, so I'm surprised to hear you say that you didn't go that route. So how did you go from having a bunch of friends interested in med school to then thinking, actually maybe I want to stick to psychology? What was your thinking when it came to that?
Right. So yes, I started as a chemistry major, and it wasn't until like my second year I was doing organic chemistry, and I was like, this isn't for me.
Oh, chem. They're called weeder courses for a reason.
They are.
Oh.
And it was just so, it was like trying to fit my foot into a shoe that didn't fit. And I struggled a lot, and I consider myself a good student, but the classes were just so difficult, and I just was not getting it, and I was not happy. On Tuesdays, I would just cry from just being overwhelmed, and I was not happy, and I didn't see the big picture of what am I going to do with this? Am I going to go to med school? Do I want to go to med school? Am I just here because everyone else is doing it? I don't want to conform. But at the same time, I thought, like, what are people going to think of me? Like, I'm quitting. So I was like, okay, let me try neuroscience. And then I did neuroscience for like a quarter, 2 quarters. And then I joined a neuro lab, and I liked the lab. It was great. I had to do experiments with mice. That wasn't so great. I worked in a basement, and I was thinking, like, no, this isn't for me either. I can't imagine myself working in a basement with mice like the rest of my life. And I still didn't see myself going into the medical field. So I did translating at a clinic. I was a Spanish translator, and I got some of my hands-on learning with what the medical field would be like, maybe even public health. And it also wasn't for me. And I had applied to many public health internships, and I got rejected from all of them. I don't even know if they were really hard to get into. I kept getting rejected from them, and it was just like a redirection, because I ended up applying to my PhD program, and it was a lot harder to get in than all the public health internships that I had applied for. So as I transitioned out of neuroscience, I took a psychology course, and I loved it. It was great. I absorbed the information quickly. I just learned so well and so much, and I was so engaged. And then it wasn't until I took my first social psychology course, I was sitting in lecture, and she was talking about like relationships, attraction, attachment theory, Gottman's, and it was so interesting to me and so engaging, and I was so passionate about the material. I would think about it often. I would study it. I would have study groups with my friends and explain everything to them, and I was so engaged, and I was so passionate, and it was the first time where I felt like this is for me. This is what I'm supposed to do. And I just love the aspect of also teaching it to other people. I thought there's a certain, I don't know, enthusiasm to teaching others about something you're passionate about. So I thought maybe grad school for psychology, maybe my master's, but I know that the job market for a master's in psychology could be very competitive. So I thought maybe a PhD, but I was also too scared to think of what if I don't get in, what if I get rejected, And then I talked to my godfather, and he told me that he's like, don't eliminate yourself, let them eliminate you. And I thought, okay, I'm just gonna apply. I'm gonna see what happens. So I decided to apply. I emailed some professors from different schools, and they got back to me. One of them taught relationship research at UC Davis, and we just connected very well. He seems like a very good person, a very good mentor. And I could see that he saw a lot of potential in me. So the next day after I applied, he emailed me. He's like, "You have an interview." And I honestly started crying because I was so like, I don't know, I was so surprised. I was shocked. I was like, wow, like he wants me to go to the school. That's the next step towards actually getting in. And, UC Davis has always been my dream school. 5 years ago, when I had first applied, I had a dream that I was riding my bike on campus because it's a biking campus. And it was it was a wonderful like dream. I was so happy. And then I didn't get in. So I was very disappointed. But I feel like now I'm reliving that dream now that I'm actually going to go there in September.
That's it really inspiring to hear you say so many words of wisdom. I'm just like, how did you learn all of that already? From earlier, like saying that, you were applying to all these public health internships and you're like, oh, that was actually a redirection, instead of what a lot of people do is they take rejection as like this personal hit, like there's something wrong with me, instead of thinking, actually, I'm supposed to do something else for now. And then your godfather telling you, like, let them eliminate you, let them say no to you, don't say no to yourself, is the way I took it when you said that. That's hopefully some people kind of that will stay with them too, is like, don't be the one to say no to yourself, because that's the thing when something is like your dream school, UC Davis, it is a big deal. It's no wonder you were crying. I mean, it doesn't feel real. You're just like, are you sure? Did they make a mistake? Like, are they gonna think twice? There's always that like voice in the back of your head, especially if it's new to you. And so I'm curious. You mentioned that you took a social psychology course, and that was one of the turning points for you. And then you had this conversation with this professor about relationship research. And so I would love to hear more, because you're here to talk about psychology. Like, what is that, what you're going to be pursuing? Is it social psychology that you're going to be studying? And if so, can you say a little bit more about that? Like, what is it that you're going to be studying? Why did you choose social psychology? In case there are other psychology majors among my listeners, and also because I know for a fact I've worked with students who are psych majors. It's such a broad major. So number one is like, it's one of the psych and soc are like some of the majors that have the highest enrollment rates on our campus. And then two, because it's so popular, there's also that competition. Like, it's no surprise that you were intimidated to apply, because it's, I know I've told my students, I usually have to have a high GPA, like it's very competitive. So I would just love to hear, if there's a student out there who is currently majoring in psych, or thinking about majoring in psych, what made you choose social psych versus other forms of psych?
Right. I believe it was mostly like my coursework for my undergraduate. I took developmental psych, I took perception psych. And out of all of the psychology courses I took, social psychology just stuck with me. I was so involved in learning more about the way people interact with others. And social psychology happens every day in our lives, and there's always so much to learn. And another aspect is the lack of studies on Latinos and the Latino population, and the lack of graduate students in the psychology field. And I feel like I need to fill in those gaps, and I need to encourage other Latinos to go into graduate school and into whatever they feel the need to, they feel compelled to. But in my field of psychology, I was very interested in like relationships and attraction, specifically within the Latino population. I also want to learn more about machismo, how machismo affects relationships. Is machismo still very prevalent in our society today? Is it prevalent within Chicanos or just within Mexicanos? There's so many topics that I have thought of. I also want to study about Tinder, the effects of Tinder. There's so many interesting topics that I would be very willing to study about and do research on. And that's why I'm going into this field, is because, I'd rather study about, relationships and people than babies in developmental psychology, or, perception. And psychology all around is just so interesting. And, I think that I'm very privileged to have the opportunity to study something I'm very passionate about. And a lot of people think like, oh, 5 years in school, you're going to do another 5 years. But I'm so excited because I feel like my last 4 years were not enough for me. And I love learning and I love being a student. And I like continuing to learn, and I love reading books. And I love learning more about others and interacting with other people. And I feel like social psychology really, it's a full circle for me with, it helps me be who I want to be and study what I like, and be a passionate person that's doing, that tries to do good for others and encourage other people to do this.
um so I'm trying to process. This is what happens is I try not to go from one question to the next. I like to give myself time to process what you're saying when you're giving me your answers, because I can't guess what you're going to say. And you said something right now that I think, because I do want us to talk about the whole process of applying to grad school, but you said the last 4 years were not enough for me.
Yeah.
And how you want to make a difference with, through what you're studying. And so you need more time with it.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that sometimes people ask me, like, well, should I or shouldn't I go to grad school? Like, how do I know? And I think that's one of the ways that you can tell whether or not, you might be like a good fit to apply to a grad program, is if you feel like undergrad was not enough. Because definitely for me, I feel like it was all surface level information. And I kind of got to some more substance through undergraduate research, but it still didn't feel like enough. And I still felt like I had so many questions and so much more that I wanted to study. And so you saying the last 4 years were not enough. And so that led to you applying to grad school. So I want to hear a little bit more about the whole process of applying. Like, I would love to hear your experience, because I didn't apply to grad school during the pandemic. I didn't apply to grad school during the times of like social media and all these apps and all this probably information overload. And so I'm curious if you could talk about your experience in applying, within the last cycle, and also just what you learned along the way, so that I know a lot of people who are just starting to listen to my podcast, it's because a friend of a friend told them, because they're interested in applying to grad school this fall. So kind of like, what was your application process like? And then also for someone who's doing it for the first time, in light of everything that's going on, there's the pandemic still technically not gone, it's still happening. Like, what advice would you give someone who's going through this process in these strange times?
Right. Actually, the pandemic was a blessing in disguise for me, because the GRE is required for most cycles, but I'm a horrible tester, very bad tester.
OMG, me too. I'm so glad that GRE is like becoming less and less of a thing.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
And it actually, I didn't have to take it this cycle because of the pandemic. You couldn't go to a testing site, and a lot of people didn't have access to internet and things like that. So it was waived for me, and it was just a huge blessing, because they relied on my strengths, my grades, my essays, my recommendation letters, and that was amazing. But I was going to say, when I first graduated undergrad, I actually didn't know what I wanted to do. I was still very indecisive about going to grad school. And I think that my gap year really solidified what I like, what I don't like. And it gave me time to be very introspective about my passions and who I am as a person, what I want to do, what my goals are. It gave me a lot of time to also read a lot of like self-help and psychology books that helped me become the best version of myself, and really showed me what I wanted my future to look like. And I took a lot of time for myself, and I actually got a 9-to-5 job. I'm working at Intel right now, and I actually don't like it that much. It's great. I like the job, but I just can't imagine working 9 to 5 every day, 40 hours a week for the rest of my life, unless it was a job I was very passionate about and I felt like my potential was being very like fulfilling. But in this case, it's not. It's very tedious, very routine-like, and it solidified the fact that I need to go to grad school and I need to have more opportunities available. And I'm actually very excited to go back to school. And once I graduated, I thought I was in denial because it was just so abrupt because of the pandemic. I had lost a quarter and a half of normal school time, and I had to finish my classes online, and I didn't have my normal commencement, and it was very it was just I was very shocked and I felt like I was going back. I felt like I was a junior, and I had still had to finish my senior year. And then, September came around and I didn't go back to school, and I just really like missed it. I missed the environment. I missed being on my own. I miss being independent. I miss the flexibility. And with the job that I have now, you clock in, you clock out, and you're done. But I feel like with school, it could be hard sometimes because you never really clock out. You always think about what's next, what you have to do. We have a huge to-do list, but at the same time, it's all for your own benefit. You're not benefiting a corporation, you're benefiting yourself, your community, the people around you, the psychology field or the research field you're doing. So it's a lot more fulfilling doing that. And I think my advice to someone who's applying to grad school is to do it. I think that we need more Latinos in grad school. We need more people of color in grad school. And I know I'm not looking forward to, being the only one, the only Latina there. And I don't know if people are going to think I'm a diversity hire or, whatever the case may be. I know I'll have imposter syndrome moments, but I'm willing to go through that for the good of other people. I want people to see me maybe as a professor or whoever I decide to do or whatever I decide to be. I want them to think like, if she could do it, I could do it. So yeah, I think that, they should do it. They should reach out to me. They should reach out to other people of color who are in the field, and just don't be scared to reach out to them. They're willing to give you good advice. They want to see you succeed. And anyone who reaches out to me, I'm willing to help them as much as I can for free. I wouldn't charge people to help them. I want to see them succeed, and I want to see more people of color in higher education.
That's amazing. So when I asked you that question, I know I asked you to share advice for anybody who's applying this fall, but then you mentioned something that I don't think I quite realized, even though I knew you were working. I didn't make the connection that this is your gap year.
Yes.
And I feel like that's something that comes up over and over and over again. This question of a gap year is like, folks have asked, like, how do I make the most of a gap year? What do I do during a gap year? How do I even like apply to grad school during a gap year? Are my professors or the recommenders going to forget about me? And so did you run into any of those concerns when you were thinking of applying to grad programs? Were you thinking, oh, well, now I'm no longer a student, and how am I going to navigate this process? Like, how did you do that all while working or while no longer being enrolled and having access to university resources, all of that?
Right. So I made connections during my gap year. So it all started, I joined this program called Científico Latino, and they help Latinos, underprivileged students get into graduate school in STEM and psychology. So I applied to the program. I was paired with a mentor named Karen, and she's from University of Wisconsin, a professor, super nice. She helped me with everything, and she teaches perceptual psychology. So then she connected me with her colleague, Dr. Brower, who is a psychologist as well and a researcher. And I worked in his lab during my gap year. I did some things for him, and I learned a lot from the lab. I learned a lot of like statistical knowledge as well that I'll be using in grad school. And making that connection secured one of my letters. The other two letters came from my professor that I worked with in my neuroscience lab, and I worked with him throughout my sophomore year to my senior year, and he gave me very good advice as well when I was applying. He encouraged me to apply, and he was just a really strong mentor for me, and I really appreciated all his help, and he wrote me a letter as well. And then my third rec letter came from my public speaking teacher. I had a class, and I loved her. She was great. She was a really great lecturer. She gave very enthused lectures. I always thought like if I was going to be a professor, I would want my lectures to be as enthusiastic as hers, as engaging as hers. And I kept in touch with her through the years. I went anytime she gave like a brown bag talk or a discussion, in a conference room, I would go to all of them. I would email her. I went to office hours. And so she remembered me. And I really admired her, and I think that's why I stayed in contact with her, because I feel the need to make connections with people that I admire, that I want to be more like, and that I respect. And she was just one of those people, and she really shed light on like my character, because she's known me throughout the years, versus my research professor highlighted what I could do, my research skills, because he got to see that firsthand throughout the years. And then my new professor got to highlight who I am as a person, even though he didn't know me that long, that I'm a fast learner and things like that. And I feel like those three different recommendation letters really helped shape my application as a person, and helped the whoever read it to know who I am as a person and the different aspects of me, not just one aspect, not just my academic aspect, but also my character, my personality, and different things like that.
So while you were doing your gap year, you said you were involved in this Científico Latinos program, and then you ended up doing some work in a lab, but then you also secured a full-time job with Intel. Like, I'm trying to figure out your timeline of what you did when, because for me, it's hard to give advice on how to make the most of a gap year, because it's not my lived experience. And so I can give examples of like people that I know that might have done that. And I'm always curious, like, what do you think helped you out the most? Was it that reflection time? Was it the working full time? Was it that program, the Científico Latinos program? Was it that connection with the professor? Was it the lab, the additional lab work? So you've done a lot.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I did make the most of my gap year, and I'm really happy with my lived experiences during this time. So I graduated, and I decided to take maybe 6 months. I didn't really keep track. I thought I'll get a full-time job when I get one. It'll appear when I need it to appear. So during this time, I was just helping my mom out with her classes. She was doing online classes, and I was there as her technical support if she needed anything. She's actually a master at it, so she didn't need my help much. So I dedicated time to exercising. I got really into books. I read a lot of books, and then I joined that program. I joined Científico Latino the deadline of the program. I decided to join, to apply, and I got in. And so it was during the graduate school application program. I was not working during that time. I was just chatting with my mentor. I was in the lab. I was doing that maybe 3 times a week, just work for the lab. And
This was this in person, or is this what you say, worked in the
online.
lab?
Yes.
Oh, okay. When you say worked in the lab, I'm like, I for some reason I just can't help but think of you being there in person. So
No,
yeah,
yeah,
okay.
sorry. This is all remote, because
Yeah.
they're in Wisconsin, so I'm not flying out there. I'm from California. And
You never know. I did hear of a student who did a summer experience, and they did fly them out in person.
oh wow,
Yeah.
yeah. No, this is all remote. But yeah, when I say in the lab, I mean like on my computer doing work for the lab. And so I did that. And then it wasn't until February that I actually started working in person. And so I've been working the past 7 months. But in February, I had already turned everything in. Everything for me was due in December, I believe. So I just focused on that. I first I took time to be introspective and reflect, and do everything I needed to do, self-care. And then once I decided I wanted to actually apply to grad school, I applied. And then I focused all my energy on that, just applying, doing my essays. My mentor helped keep me on track with everything. And it's just so much to remember. So it's really beneficial to have a support system. And then after I applied, then I decided to start working and save money. And so I started working. I started my 401k. I started my Roth IRA. I learned a lot about being financially stable, and what to do in the stock market. And I think that, it's important to take that time to become financially literate. I think that we as a society don't place enough value on the importance of being financially literate, and what you need to do, and techniques and strategies. So I took time to study that. And then now I'm working. I've saved a lot of money. My program is fully funded, but I also want to have like an emergency fund in case I ever need money, or I want to travel. And I've decided to also put money towards my travel funds. I'm going to Hawaii and going to different places that also brings me a lot of happiness. I want to make sure my gap year is well, I wanted to make sure my gap year was a really happy time for me, and I've done that so far. So I'm excited, I'm refreshed, and I'm ready to go into school again. Yeah.
I feel like if someone were to ask me like, how do I make the most of my gap year, I'm gonna be like, talk to Eva.
Yeah, they could
Because
talk.
you've done it all. Wow. I don't want to completely like gloss over the fact that you mentioned financial literacy and how important that is. And that's something that for those of us that are first gen, or those of us that come from low income or working class backgrounds, it's not a privilege that we have. We're not taught these things, and it's really hard to take this step to even get started learning. It's really overwhelming. For some of us, it can induce feelings of shame, or it can just be really scary to confront your finances and numbers. And some people insist that, oh, they're not a math person, they're not a numbers person. And sometimes that can get in the way of them learning about financial literacy. And so hopefully this is not an episode about financial literacy, but I'm glad that you mentioned it, because I do think it's important. And I do think it's even more important to do that, not just during grad school, but as you're getting ready to start graduate school. That way you're going to graduate school, you've made an informed decision, like you said, you're going to have your emergency savings, and you're also thinking about it as, it's not just, okay, now I'm going to be a student, but you want to have a life outside of graduate school too. So not only do you have an emergency savings, but also to have the capacity to plan for some joy, for taking vacations, for taking trips, and so on. So I know that wasn't the case for me, and it isn't the case for a lot of current graduate students. They get so caught up in the daily grind of graduate school, work, that it's really hard to take time off, even more so if you're really tight on finances and can't afford to take a trip or do something that would allow them to rest or take care of themselves. So thank you for sharing that. We're getting close to wrapping up, and so I wanted to ask if there's anything else that you wanted to share around the topic of applying to graduate school, getting into graduate school, specifically in psychology, or any final words of advice for folks who are going to be applying this fall.
Right. Yes, I feel like the most important thing is to just make connections. They always say your network is your network. And I've learned so much from other people, from connecting with other people. Your next job could be a new connection. It's really important to make friends and read a lot. I think that there is a treasure. Reading is a treasure. Books are a treasure. I've learned a lot about finances, about myself, about psychology. Anything you're interested in, you could just grab a book. $15, $20. That's the best investment you can make, is reading. And I think that if I were to recommend a book for anyone in their 20s, it's called Defining the Decade: Why Your 20s Matter and How You Can Make the Most of Them. So even if you're indecisive about going to grad school or whatever it may be, you should pick up that book. It really impacted me, and I recommend it to any person in their 20s. It's such a great book. But yeah, I think making connections is the most important, and just reading, learning about yourself. And my last piece of advice is, if you look good, you feel good, you do good. So take that time for self-care, and really make sure that you're happy inside, because then whatever you do, all your work will come out great.
That's great. That's perfect way to end today's episode. Okay, one last thing before I let you go. How can folks listening reach out to you if they want to contact you, follow you, connect in some way? What's the best way for them to do that?
Okay, so I am starting a new Instagram called at Latinx Success Network. So if they could want to contact me, I'm definitely open to helping others. They could reach me on that platform on Instagram.
Awesome. Okay, I'll make sure to tag you in the flyer on IG. And yeah, that's a great way for us to be in touch, and I'll be following you as well. All right. Well, thank you so much, Eva. It's been so nice to have you today. I've learned so much. I'm sure everybody else has learned a lot. You dropped quite a bit of knowledge and wisdom there in today's episode.
Thank you
Thank
for having
you.
me.
Thanks so much for joining me in the Grad School Femtoring Podcast. If you liked what you heard, please rate this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or anywhere you tune in. You can also support the podcast by donating to my Patreon page, Anchor page, or Venmo account, which is at Grad School Femtoring. If you have questions or episode topics, you can contact me by sending me a DM on Instagram, sending me an email to gradschoolfemtoring@gmail.com, sending me a voice message on Anchor, or sending me a message via my personal website at YvetteMartinezvu.com. Until next time.